They laughed when the janitor spoke, because he carried a mop instead of a title, wore silence instead of confidence, and looked like someone the world had already decided not to listen to. They laughed because it was easier than noticing the tired wisdom in his eyes. They laughed until the sound of spinning blades cut through the sky, and everything they thought they understood about worth, power, and humility began to shake. The building woke before the sun, and so did the janitor. While offices slept behind glass walls and polished doors, he moved quietly through long corridors, pushing his cart with slow care, as if the floors themselves deserved respect. His name was Elias, though few people used it. To most, he was simply the janitor, a background detail as unnoticed as the hum of fluorescent lights. He worked with patience that came from years of being invisible, wiping away yesterday's messes without asking who made them or why. Every morning, employees streamed in carrying coffee and confidence. Their laughter echoed loudly, sharp and careless, often passing straight through Elias as though he were air. When someone bumped into him, apologies were rare and brief, eyes already searching for more important things. He had learned not to flinch. He had learned that dignity did not require an audience. Still, there were moments when the silence weighed heavily, when he wondered how easily people forgot that every hallway they rushed through was made clean by unseen hands. On this particular morning, the building buzzed with excitement. A corporate inspection was scheduled, followed by a demonstration involving a helicopter landing on the rooftop. Executives had gathered early, suits pressed, smiles practiced. The helicopter was meant to symbolize progress, success, and ambition. It was something impressive, something loud enough to demand attention. Elias listened from afar as conversations floated down the halls, filled with pride and certainty. He continued mopping, though his movements slowed as he felt a familiar unease settle in his chest. During his break, Elias stepped outside to empty a bin. He looked up at the rooftop, studying the wind patterns as flags twisted sharply above. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in fear, but in concern shaped by old memories. Years ago, before life had narrowed into quiet hallways and early mornings, he had worked around machines like that helicopter. He had learned to read the air, to sense when confidence ignored caution. Those years felt distant now, almost like someone else's life, but the knowledge remained, steady and unwelcome. When Elias mentioned his concern to a nearby supervisor, his words came out gently, without urgency or drama. He spoke of the wind, of balance, of timing. The supervisor smiled politely, barely listening, then laughed. Others nearby joined in, amused by the idea of a janitor offering advice about something so important. Elias nodded once, accepting the dismissal with practiced calm. He returned to his work, though his hands trembled slightly as he wrung out the mop. As the day progressed, anticipation grew. Employees gathered near windows, pointing phones upward, waiting for spectacle. Elias watched too, standing at the edge of the crowd. He felt small among them, not because of his job, but because he knew how little weight his voice carried. Still, he watched the sky carefully, feeling the wind shift again. Somewhere deep inside, patience battled regret, and humility stood quietly between fear and hope, waiting to see which would be heard. The helicopter arrived with a roar that swallowed conversation and scattered birds into the distance. Its blades sliced the air with mechanical confidence, a sound that demanded respect. Faces tilted upward, eyes wide with admiration. Phones recorded every second, capturing the moment people would later replay as proof of importance. Elias stood still, hands resting on his cart, watching the machine fight against gusts that grew stronger by the minute. On the rooftop, executives gestured proudly, unaware of how the wind tugged unpredictably at the aircraft. Laughter continued below, mixed with cheers and applause. The supervisor who had dismissed Elias earlier clapped the loudest, basking in the spectacle. Elias felt his chest tighten as the helicopter wobbled slightly, correcting itself with effort. The movement was subtle, almost graceful, but to someone who knew what to look for, it was a warning. Elias stepped forward instinctively, raising his voice this time. He didn't shout, but urgency colored his words. He spoke again of timing, of waiting, of letting the wind settle. The laughter returned, sharper now, edged with irritation. Someone told him to step back, to stop causing a scene. The crowd's amusement turned into annoyance, and Elias felt heat rise to his face. Still, he did not retreat. He stood there, heart pounding, knowing that silence now would haunt him later. Then the helicopter spun. Not dramatically at first, just a sudden, unmistakable twist that sent a ripple of fear through the watching crowd. Applause died mid-clap. Phones wavered. The air seemed to hold its breath. Elias felt time stretch thin as the machine struggled, blades fighting forces they could not fully control. The sound changed, becoming uneven, desperate. Panic spread quickly. Executives shouted into radios. People below screamed and backed away. In that chaos, Elias moved. He didn't think about laughter or pride. He ran toward the emergency controls near the access door, knowledge rising from memory like a long-forgotten language. His movements were sure, shaped by experience rather than ego. He signaled, waited for a crucial shift, then acted, guiding the response with calm gestures that cut through fear. Minutes felt like hours, but slowly, the helicopter steadied. Its spin slowed, then stopped. The roar softened, retreating into a controlled hum. When it finally lifted away safely, silence fell over the building. No one laughed. No one spoke. All eyes turned to the janitor standing near the door, breathing hard, hands still raised as if holding the air itself. Elias lowered his arms and stepped back, suddenly aware of how loud his heartbeat sounded. The supervisor stared at him, face pale, eyes filled with something unfamiliar. Gratitude, perhaps, mixed with shame. No applause followed, no cheers. Just quiet understanding spreading slowly, like light through a dark room. Elias returned to his cart, resuming his work as though nothing had happened, but nothing was the same anymore. In the days that followed, the building felt different. Conversations softened when Elias passed. People met his eyes, some offering awkward smiles, others murmuring thank you as if unsure how to speak to someone they had never truly seen before. The supervisor approached him one afternoon, words heavy with apology. Elias listened without interruption, nodding gently, accepting the regret without savoring it. He knew how difficult it was to admit being wrong, especially when laughter had once felt so justified. Yet change did not come easily for everyone. Some employees struggled with their discomfort, avoiding Elias rather than facing the reminder of their own assumptions. Whispers followed him down hallways, speculation about his past, about how a janitor could know such things. Elias heard them but did not respond. He understood the need people had to explain away moments that challenged their beliefs. It was easier to invent a story than to accept humility. Inside Elias, old conflicts stirred. Memories of the life he had lost returned with sharper edges. He remembered when his own ego had once been louder than his caution, when mistakes had cost him more than a job. The janitor's uniform was not a punishment, as many assumed, but a refuge. It had given him time to learn patience, to practice kindness without expectation. Still, being seen again reopened wounds he thought had healed. One evening, as the building emptied, Elias lingered by the windows. The city lights flickered like distant stars, indifferent to human pride. The supervisor joined him quietly, no longer standing above him, but beside him. They spoke little. Words felt unnecessary. In that shared silence, something honest grew. Respect not earned through titles, but through understanding. The next morning, Elias found a note on his cart. It was simple, handwritten, thanking him not only for saving lives, but for cleaning floors without complaint, for showing up every day with quiet integrity. More notes followed in the weeks after. Small gestures appeared. Coffee left waiting. Doors held open. None of it erased the past, but it softened it. Elias continued his work as before, but his steps felt lighter. He spoke when something mattered, and people listened now, not because of the helicopter, but because they had learned to listen. The building had not changed its structure, but its heart had shifted slightly, making room for humility. Through action rather than speeches, the lesson settled. Wisdom often wears simple clothes. Value hides in plain sight. And laughter, when careless, can echo longer than intended. Elias knew this well. He had lived it. And though recognition came late, he accepted it with grace, knowing that true growth, like clean floors, required consistent effort and quiet care. Time moved on, smoothing the sharp edges of that day into memory, but its impact remained. New employees joined the building, hearing the story in fragments, often surprised by how easily they recognized themselves in it. Elias became a quiet anchor, someone people sought when uncertainty crept in. He never offered advice unless asked, and even then, his words were measured, shaped by listening more than speaking. One afternoon, a young intern laughed dismissively at Elias, repeating the old pattern without knowing its history. The room fell silent. Before Elias could respond, the supervisor gently corrected the intern, not with anger, but with calm explanation. The intern's face flushed with embarrassment, and later, an apology followed. Elias accepted it kindly, understanding that learning often began with discomfort. Privately, Elias reflected on how easily roles reversed. He knew he could have let pride take root, could have enjoyed his new respect as repayment. Instead, he chose restraint. He remembered how ego had once misled him, and he refused to let it return disguised as righteousness. His growth was not in being seen, but in remaining steady. The helicopter returned months later for another demonstration. This time, preparation was careful, voices were open, and Elias was consulted without ceremony. The landing went smoothly, uneventfully. There was no laughter, no spectacle, just a job done well, by many hands working together. Elias watched from below, feeling neither fear nor pride, only quiet satisfaction. That evening, as he locked up, Elias paused to look at his reflection in the glass. He saw the lines of age, the marks of mistakes, and the calm that had come from acceptance. His life had not turned into a dramatic success story. He was still a janitor. But he understood now that success was not measured by how loudly others listened, but by how gently one moved through the world. The building lights dimmed as he left, corridors clean, ready for another day. Elias walked into the night knowing that compassion, once practiced, had a way of spreading quietly, changing spaces without demanding credit. And in that understanding, he felt whole. Years later, Elias retired without ceremony. There were no speeches, no grand farewell, just a small gathering in the lobby, where people shared stories of moments they had been helped, guided, or simply noticed. Elias listened, smiling softly, surprised by how far his quiet actions had traveled. The supervisor, now older and humbler, spoke last. He admitted how laughter had once blinded him, how easily he had confused authority with wisdom. His voice broke as he thanked Elias for teaching him to slow down, to listen, to see. Others nodded, recognizing their own journeys in his words. Elias responded briefly. He spoke of mistakes, of patience, of how floors stayed clean only if cared for daily. He reminded them that kindness worked the same way. His words were simple, but they lingered long after the gathering ended. When Elias left the building for the final time, the halls echoed softly behind him. Outside, the wind moved gently, carrying distant city sounds. He paused, feeling gratitude not for recognition, but for the life that had shaped him through humility and quiet endurance. Somewhere above, a helicopter passed, steady and controlled, barely noticed. Elias smiled and continued walking, knowing that the greatest lessons were often learned when laughter stopped and listening began. In the end, it was never about the helicopter or the laughter. It was about how easily people overlook quiet wisdom, how quickly ego can silence truth, and how powerful simple actions become when guided by compassion. Life teaches not through titles or noise, but through moments that ask us to pause, listen, and choose humility. When we learn to see value in every person, especially those we once ignored, we don't just change our opinions, we change ourselves.